I'm going to get straight into the debate. I mean, earlier on, Jerry said to me, "You're not going to make this confrontational, are you?" And the answer is, I said no. And of course, I'm a journalist, so I fibbed totally. This is going to be deeply confrontational. No, it's not. It's going to be slightly confrontational, only slightly, in the sense that I didn't put these numbers out here. A bunch called Gartner, which I gather are something in the technology world, did. And they basically said that by, I think, 2017, 2018, the budget spend on technology of a marketing director is going to be bigger than that of the poor CIO. And that this is a big, big sea change, and therefore we're going to have to rethink the way we work together.
Well, I have an equally interesting statistic,
Go
which
for
is
it.
that 70% of statistics are made up on the spot.
Not in the Economist. I promise you, not in the. Well, actually, maybe. Occasionally, no, not in the Economist. But you're right, and so that one may well be. I mean, I think it's true when you just listen to the panel beforehand of these two very prominent CMOs. They're spending. Their companies are spending substantial amounts of money on infrastructure. So, how do we see this relationship developing? And I think it would be great to start with Jerry. I mean, you work very closely with your colleague who's Chief Marketing Officer. Can you tell us a little bit about how that relationship works?
You bet. Let me start off by giving a little bit of background about the relationship as I see it of CMOs and CIOs, because I think the history of that relationship is part of the fabric of what it's becoming. If you think about 10 years ago, if a CMO and a CIO had a relationship, it was usually about running the web servers. It was pretty basic. It was keep those websites up, make sure the throughput's good, and host some pages. Maybe IT helped write some HTML for those pages. And a few years later, email marketing became the big buzz, and maybe IT helped out with that again on the infrastructure side and bandwidth. But suddenly, in the last 3 years, the explosion of digital marketing as a capability for a business to harness to grow their revenue and their customer loyalty. Now we've got the CMOs and CIOs partnering because they need to embrace big data, as we heard from the previous panelists, as a way to drive personalized user experience. So in this tradition of a service provider in the IT organization with the CMO as the customer, we have now gone through the transformation of the relationship where they're now partners. So no longer is it just about keeping a server running for the website. It's now about harnessing big data in a way that can be actionable for the business and the marketer. So I think it's pretty significant, but I think it's because we've had a combination of business needs changing, the emergence of technology around digital marketing, with the convergence of big data all at the same time. And I think it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
Liza?
I think that's absolutely right. And I would say, it's interesting, our CIO's office happens to be immediately adjacent to mine. And we describe our relationship as healthy co-conspirators. Right? We spend a lot of time together, but I do think, the why of it is exactly right. I think part of it is also, a lot of the dialogue we have is really around, he really, really wants a partner who understands enough about sort of his challenges and his opportunities to really be a smart use case provider. Because I actually think, it's like the old Sims ads, like the informed consumer is our best customer. I think that relationship between the CMO and CIO really holds true as well.
Yeah.
I feel the love coming down from this side of the big hug, the group hugs, but let me just posit something for a moment. I spend a lot of time with IT people, and I've spent a fair bit in my previous career with marketing people. And I see, there are different mindsets and different frames. So for example, I'm a marketer, especially in this new world that we've been hearing a lot about today. I want to buy applications and I want to put them in right away, right? I want them running. I might use them for a year and then they're out. I want to do all these kind of things really quickly and, there's security, I got one. The CIOs, no, hang on a moment. And we've got an architecture, we've got an infrastructure. You want to bolt stuff in just left, right, and center? No, come on. And we have budgets and we spend in certain ways. Isn't there like a fundamental tension between the motivation and the mindset of the CIO and the motivation and the mindset of the CMO? And how do we sort of square those? Or is that unfair, the characterization?
I don't know if I would, and you should weigh in here, I don't know if I would describe it as a fundamental disconnect in the motivation. I do think, and maybe this is the line you're drawing, sometimes the way the efficacy and success of those roles is measured is really tied to those different kinds of outcomes. But I do think, and so certainly there's always this, I think there are sort of two, sort of long-standing challenges in those relationships that are healthy tensions. One is, and having spent some formative part of my career at IBM, I'm sensitive to the strong desire within the technology community that is sort of their aversion to the not invented here syndrome, right? So if you were drawing a polarity, you might say, marketers would want technology partners to be great integrators, right? Give us like a smooth backbone and then everything else we pick and pack, the best possible solution that we can buy off the shelf and get out on the street immediately. And the other is, I think we talked about this offline, is I need it out tomorrow. Right. You've got a process, and my agency is whispering devil-like in my ear. Well, I can build that website with 3 guys in a shed in 5 days.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it won't run.
If I can,
and one dog.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd like to add
I'm definitely going to bring you in, Jerry, very quickly, and then Maya is going to have
We've
his
got
moment.
2 ladies here, sorry.
Forget
No.
I'm happy
No
losing.
sexism on this stage,
So
please,
I have
please.
2 comments to just add to that. I agree with what you said. One comment is that tension of get it done faster and I can do it faster myself is not unlike we see in other areas of the business.
Okay.
Salesforce.com
Absolutely.
grew a very successful company by appealing to the sales management team to bring in systems, often without the involvement of IT. But today, if you look at most successful Salesforce.com implementations in decent size enterprises, you do have IT involved because they're providing the discipline, the structure, the architecture. So that's one point. I don't really think it's so different in the evolution of other departments. The second thought is, of course, I think CIOs all hear the same mantra. I want it faster, I want it cheaper. I want it faster, I want it cheaper all the time. And I think that a lot of IT organizations have spent the last few years reimagining themselves into much more agile organizations who embrace SaaS players more, who are looking for more services to engage with, and they've actually become more of a broker of systems than a builder of systems.
I think that's right.
And so I think that's where we're seeing some of this good synergy happen.
Maya is weird. I don't mean that personally, but he's sitting in as an IT person inside marketing. So how does all this look for you?
Yeah, the fact that I'm weird, you're not the only one who says it. My wife says that too every day.
My wife says about me too. So
Okay.
That's good.
But, first of all, it's fascinating to see, how aligned, the CM or the CIO is. And I think I want to go back to the first statement, how you started, Martin, which is the statement from Gartner. And I've said this many times. I think that statement did more harm than good, to be honest, because I think it shifted the focus to organizational models and structures and ownerships and budgets, as opposed to looking at the gap that exists in the industry to drive consumer experiences. And that gap is that the consumer has truly become omnichannel. The consumer, thanks to the disruption and the innovation in technology, the consumer has been empowered to make choices. And all of us in this room are consumers ourselves, and we feel that way. I think 2 things are happening in an organization for any brand in response to that, which is marketing is changing, the way to market is changing and evolving because it's transformed by technology, as well as the conventional ways of doing and delivering technology solution is evolving as well. Now, when we use the word IT, I honestly feel it creates confusion because IT has 2 meanings. It is information technology, which is a type of technology, but for the most part, it refers to a set of an organizational structure as well. But if you simply look at the fact that it's information technology, and that is changing now to what we're calling marketing technology, capabilities that are needed to drive consumer experiences, the dialogue, the friction goes away, because just like marketing, technology has to evolve as well. And I think the place where the consumer is touching the brand is at that intersection where these 2 come together. So I think it'll be naive to think that a CMO could do something by himself, or a CIO could do something by himself. And it's no different than the friction you may have between the CIO or finance or marketing and sales. I think it's very similar. But I know we're infatuated by the C-level conflicts. We love to talk about it.
But, I think an interesting point is the big C, the CEO, really should be the person who makes sure that alignment happens, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they're the ones who set your targets and so they want collaboration, they tell you to collaborate, right? So to me, if there's a problem, it starts right at the top of the C-suite. Maybe that's unfair, but nevertheless. But it sounds like to me that's not the issue for you. I'd love to just ask the Chief Marketing Officer and the Chief Information Officer, do you think Maya should have a job? Is his function, is it worthwhile having somebody from IT sit in the sort of agent in the CMO area or not?
I think,
Sorry.
first of all, we certainly have lots of openings if you're looking, so.
Look at that. It's a job
But,
offer on stage. I'll be your agent.
This may be the first time today.
Look at that.
But I do think, I mean, we actually, in the fall of this year, and I've only been at the organization for about 9 months, but restructured the marketing team. And one of the functions we created was a marketing operations function, whose job it is to really to sort of partner with both operations and technology on all of the infrastructure, all the data mining, all the data cleansing, all of the sort of hard and soft infrastructure we need to deliver on personalized, data-driven marketing, right? So I think that skill set is absolutely necessary. I think the point you were making earlier, which is, it doesn't really matter where in the organization it lives, so long as, and I genuinely believe this, right? I have a lot of discussion around sort of the data assets that are, sort of the bread and butter of our business, and they're all managed outside of marketing. And I have no issue with that because we've got the right subject matter experts and the right interaction model, and to your point, the right incentive structure on top of that. So collaboration is necessary to be successful in your job. So I do think that skill set is necessary. Should it live in marketing? Potato.
So go to Jerry first and then come back to you.
Okay.
So you can defend your job.
I mean, I have very similar thoughts from our side. I think it's the skill set that's important. And in our case, we developed an analyst team inside marketing, but they don't actually own the underlying architecture technology. And let me give an example. We, this past year, brought together 6 petabytes of data from 20 different sources across our corporation. We're using that 6 petabytes of data to dynamically, in the last millisecond, change user experience and customize it for the consumer or the customer or the person on the other side of the screen who's trying to get something done. And this has had such amazing results that we've seen as much as a 200% increase in display ad click-through. We've seen, in some cases, 124% increase in special offer acceptance by just taking that 6 petabytes of data and what personalization we know about that customer, that segment, that discipline, and modifying the experience at the last millisecond. Now, why I'm bringing that up is because to actually put together that 6 petabytes of data required some very deep technical knowledge that was really embedded in the IT organization. Some very new technology, using SAP HANA to make it work, and so that was very much an IT discipline. On the other hand, the people in the business were the ones who really helped us map what that 6 petabytes of data meant to the business. And the marketer, this analysis analyst team, are the ones who said which parts of that data they want to leverage for that last millisecond experience. Right. So I think what's important is we're seeing a skill set shift. It's no longer just about one big flat relational database. It's a whole ecosystem.
Yeah, and if I could share one other example of that, which is a great one. We built, 3 or 4 years ago, sort of use case-based Hadoop environment that was really developed for the fraud and risk team, right? And we have a decision management team within marketing who's thinking about customer behaviors, and one of the things they did was sit down with the fraud team and the data team and information technology, really understand what was in the Hadoop environment. It was like, hey, if this is showing us sort of the trails of what sort of goods look like and frauds look like, that's great information for us as we're thinking about creating personalized environment and models. And so we've layered on additional use cases on top of that same environment, right? So it's the same thing. It's just what questions do you bring to the table, but absent that core team of really, really skilled data management and data scientists, that wouldn't have happened.
That's great. Maya, can you talk about your role at Kimberly-Clark and sort of the experiences that you have in this sort of combined area?
Yeah, for me, it's very simple, and I love to simplify it so that my job's not in danger. So it's in my interest to.
You're
to say,
totally safe with me.
This is not a problem. But I say it very simply, which is marketing today, and we heard that the whole day today. Everything that we were talking, all the panels were on how marketing is using data, how marketing is using technology, which means technology is dramatically and radically transformed marketing, where now technology is an interface for marketing. And I couldn't agree more that more than the budget or organizational challenge, it is a capability and a skill gap that exists, because I often say the consumer has truly become omni-channel. But I think as brands, we are still multi-channel. We are still siloed.
Right.
And what we've done, for example, at Kimberly-Clark,
Right.
And there are multiple different models. For example, at Motorola, the CIO is now reporting into CMO. Not saying that's the only way to do it, but that's an example. What we've done is our CMO and CIO were great thought leaders, and they looked at, just like Adobe as well, we've got a great collaboration. That's why I'm here. We've created a hybrid model where half of the circle is marketing technologists coming from the marketing organization, and then there's a similar set of technologists who are understanding marketing coming from the IT organization. And in terms of ownership, it's a collaborative ownership model where we're driving both enterprise global capabilities as well as technology innovation to drive consumer experiences.
And I often find these things when I'm reporting for The Economist, it comes down to money, strangely enough. So who owns the budget? So we want to do this. I mean, sorry to be crude about it, but at the end of the day, so who owns the budget? Yeah, so do you give it to marketing, and ultimately does marketing have the spec? Or do you give it to IT, or do you give it to Maya, who can sit between the two and say you can have a bit of this and you can have a bit? I mean, isn't that where does the money sit at Kimberly-Clark?
I can tell you that 95% of the organizations, the money neither sits with IT or marketing, because both of them are in the service of the business, of the brands, and the P&Ls.
Right.
So that's why the Gartner statement again is pointless, because the issue isn't the budget. Both of them are in the service of the business and the brands, and they have to partner on how best to do it. So in our world, the money is really lying with the brands. We're going together and begging for the money because we both believe, hey, this is the right thing to do.
Somehow I think that's a good idea.
And what we realize is if you go to the same guy who's got the pocket, who's got the wallet, and you're coming from two different doors, we'll collapse. So we learned the hard way. Now we're going together with holding hands with each other from one door and saying, this is why it makes sense. Please give us the money. We'll bring back ROI.
You're nodding. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I also like the visual image of you guys walking through the door holding hands.
And begging,
right?
Oh, I thought the begging bit was... Okay.
And begging.
Skipping at the same time.
Okay, good. I'd like to open to the floor, because this is such a great area. Yeah, I thought there'd be questions. Yeah, so we're going to take one over here. Do we have the microphones? Yeah, we do. Thank you very much.
Reach scale. I apologize, this could take a little bit of a setup. So in all of this stuff sounds great, but then you go to Social Media Week, which I was at 2 weeks ago, and you get a presentation about how this tool enabled us to find this magazine I've never heard of before and make this offer to this sub-segment of the market that whoever had the time to think up that offer, much less find the market to give it to. So in that context, it's always easy to drill down in the stuff we know, and we always overinvest in that. So 3 data points. Adobe, because they've gone to the cloud, is less able to see the world that isn't using the cloud. But one could argue that a huge portion of Adobe's future growth will come from that global south world where the cloud isn't operative. E-Trade is an adjacent business to crowdfunding in some senses. And crowdfunding funders are getting investment because they have access to data that the regular financial companies don't have, Indiegogo being a good example, $15 million recently. Kimberly-Clark has competitors who've made massive commitments to going to the rest of the world, building their businesses there, and no studying of the data you currently have will tell you which business models are going to be successful in those new places. So how do you make the decision, and how do you make sure the resources get to the finding of this much more important data than that little magazine niche, and that data gets gathered by smart people who may not use big data to analyze it, they'll use big other things.
Okay. I think you should spend tons of money on magazines, actually, but nevertheless, if it's only a little category, but you can answer that question anyway. Please, feel free.
Do you want to go first? You want me to go?
It doesn't matter. Go ahead.
Okay. So I would say this, just as a sidebar, I actually do not think I don't think we are in an adjacent space to crowdfunding, but it's been an interesting debate to have afterwards.
Right. On the data.
Right, but on the data, I think a couple of things are true. One, the point you were making about, so you can drill down smaller and smaller and smaller, I actually think that is a mistake that lots of organizations make, and part of what that does is just take resources away from starting to get into the unknowable. And one of the things we do at E-Trade is really draw a line around how much time, money, and effort we are going to spend on things that I would describe as hobbies, and it's a really small percentage. You have to do a little bit so that you can kind of have a little bit of serendipity. But I would say people who get very caught up in that kind of rabbit hole, that's a order magnitude error. But the second thing is on how do you get to the data around the unknowable? And for us, we do two things. One, we partner with a lot of people who are in truly adjacent spaces, and we listen to them. So whether it is partners like ours at RGA who are touching industries like athletics, footwear, cinema, because we want to actually get their learning and we listen to them.
Right.
And the other thing we do is we've got sort of deep relationships with customer advisory boards who are actually spending more time looking at types of data that we don't look at. Because I know we were listening to the panel earlier and you asked the question, where do you stop collecting data?
Right.
Because it is infinite. And I think it is actually recognizing there are people who know stuff you don't know and investing the time to listen to them.
Yep. And maybe, so then on the Adobe side, I think there's a couple of things. I agree with your point about you have to have diminishing returns and you have to know when it becomes a hobby versus you're actually making meaningful impact. And it's not all just about selling something. We collect data for customers who choose to opt in about their usage patterns. And through that, we actually provide them and serve them up help based on things that they're trying to do that are looking like they keep running into the wall. We spend time actually just looking at the data to discover patterns of usage. Hey, you know what? Users that tend to use these 3 features had got really excited about this new feature we launched last quarter. Therefore, we want to pay more attention to this feature and make sure it gives us the next generation of product engagement.
Right.
I think for us, going to services, the number one thing that we've seen is that our customers are embracing our new features faster. And the data is actually giving us better visibility on where to double down on investment for our customers' benefit versus where to back off. So I do think a lot of discovery actually is going on with data scientists. You just may not be hearing about it at the social conference you were at.
I'll take a couple more questions and give you first shot at the next one, yeah? We take other questions around. Is there a gentleman standing up? Are you looking for a microphone? Are you dancing? Okay. He's the man with the microphone. That's why he's dancing. Is there a question over there? Other questions? No. Oh, I have a couple of other questions, strangely enough.
I think we may have just solved all the problems.
No, I don't think we have. That's why. I have one interesting question, which is in terms of the sort of resources that are split between, so the Myers of this world. I mean, I didn't really push you both on it, and I think you have your teams on either side. But how are we going to see a day, I'm looking out 5 years here, where effectively we've got a CMO-CIO or a CMO-CIO, or whatever we're going to call it. It's like these two things are really merged, so that Jerry and Lisa will have you'll be one. And it's no longer useful to have the CIO on this side and the CMO, or there'll always be this division. Who wants to go first?
Well, I don't see it in the next 3 to 5 years. And the reason I don't see it is for the same reasons I don't see a CFO-CIO, or I don't see a general manager-CIO, or, I think that the two disciplines come at the problems with different lenses, and it's valuable to have both of those lenses be exceedingly mature and developed. A CMO, at least our CMO, looks at things in terms of brand and customer loyalty and how do I think about positioning our messaging to our customers to make them successful. Whether I like it or not, I'm a CIO, and I think about things like data integrity at some level. I think about next generation architecture.
And given what's going on in cybersecurity, that's all the more important.
It's a big deal.
Right
I think
now.
a lot about security.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to have those two disciplines come together, and I don't think it's so very unlike other disciplines we've seen. I do think there's a renaissance going on in terms of the impact of digital for a marketing role, and I think that's really what we're seeing.
I think I would would agree and a little disagree as well at the same time. Whether you will have CMO or CIO combined or not, I think that's more organizational question because it depends on how you're structured, your scale and whatnot. What will happen, and it's already happening right now, is there is a breed coming up which is molded from the T-shaped people to the pie-shaped, the people who can actually understand both. So if they're talking at the table, they're talking about consumer experiences and brand strategies, they can have their conversation. They can also have a pretty deep dive technology conversation. That is bound to happen. And I think at some, and I agree with Jerry actually, it may not happen in 3 or 4 years at that level. However, I think at some point we will see that educational systems and courses and curriculums will start to evolve. They'll start to cross-pollinate because the consumer landscape has shifted, and that's a necessity now. I cannot be a T-shaped specialist, who's only thinking about technology or marketing in isolation.
And we should probably wrap up to keep us on time. So I want to just say, the talking baby, you've got to give me, I wanted to have a shot of it here, and they said, no, Martin, you're on stage. We don't need another talking baby. So they refused to let me do it. But where did that idea come from? And,
well, the talking baby predates me at E-Trade by about 6 years, but the core insight...
I'll give you the credit, right.
The core insight for the talking baby is so simple, a baby can do it, right? Taking the idea that online investing, but our brand and our business have grown up since then, so stay tuned.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, please would you thank my panelists? They're terrific. Thank you very much. You're great. Thank you.